Historically, there's been a major issue plaguing the clinical research and healthcare industry. Women have been majorly underrepresented when it comes to clinical tests in healthcare. In clinical trials for cancer treatment, 51% of cancer patients are female. However, in these trials, only 41% of the actual participants were female. Over a 4-year span, from 2016 to 2019, a total of 1,433 clinical trials were examined with around 302,000 participants, yet only 41% of these participants were women. Given that women make up around 50% of the population, there's about a net 20% skew in underrepresentation of women in these trials. However, this may not be fully intentional. Scientists and clinical researchers are not intentionally excluding women from these tests, saying, how can we exclude women and prioritize research for men over women in clinical studies? Rather, the underrepresentation of women in clinical studies happens subconsciously through a phenomenon called false universalism. This is where the dominant group's experience in society is taken to be the universal experience for every group in society. In this case, the male experience and identity is taken to be the universal experience and identity in healthcare. In consequence, women are made invisible in society because when we conceptualize a person, when we think about a person, we picture a man rather than a woman. As a result, women's interests and issues are taken less seriously than men's, leading to a lack of representation for women in the healthcare industry. No better is this seen than in clinical research for heart attacks. Although heart attacks are the leading cause of death in both men and women have been excluded from many key trials such as the multiple risk factor intervention trial and the Physicians' Health study of aspirin's preventative power against heart disease. As a result, there is little to no data on the effects of disease preventative drugs on women. The exclusion of women in clinical studies over the course of history has led to a lack of available health information and quality of healthcare women receive compared to men. When women are sufficiently included in clinical trials, it is often to examine how their disease could spread and affect men and children. For example, AIDS research on women focuses on how women transmit AIDS to men and their children, while at the same time, there is little actual research done on how AIDS actually affects women themselves. It sends a message that men's health is more important than women's health. Women are being put at risk of death and significant time away from work because of a lack of studies that analyze the side effects of diseases and treatments for women. Are women of minority groups. There are many cases in which women of minority groups have been exploited for the sake of clinical research. The Puerto Rico contraceptive trials tested early forms of birth control on poor, uneducated Puerto Rican women without their knowing that it was even going on. Additionally, the Goldsire studies tested the side effects and potential risk of oral contraceptives. The issue was they non-consensually provided placebo pills to many poor Mexican women, resulting in many unexpected pregnancies. This sort of behavior is absolutely unacceptable and intolerable from the healthcare industry. In my opinion, we should strive to create equitable clinical studies for men and women. This would mean ensuring each study consists of 50% women and 50% men. That way, the research and data extracted from each study would be equal for both men and women. Obviously, the solution is forward-thinking, as the effects of women's exclusion in clinical trials have placed a major setback on the amount of data and quality of healthcare they receive. However, the more years we implement an equitable form of clinical trials, slowly the data available and access to healthcare will balance out and set up future generations nicely so that men and women are on an equal playing field in the healthcare industry. Additionally, I believe past trials should be run again. However, this time there will be a focus on women and the effects of the diseases or treatments. Hopefully, this will accelerate the journey to equal healthcare for men and women in this country. As always, thank you for listening, and as you guys know, just let me know what you think in the comments. I'm curious how you guys would approach this issue.